I want to share with you a powerful revelation from the book of Genesis that you've never heard of before. Now, we know in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Now, what you need to understand, which is quite interesting, that there's a few paradoxes in that statement. So the Bible says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." Now, we know from the book of Revelation that Jesus Christ said, "I am the beginning." So if you read that verse again, does that mean that in Jesus, God created the heaven and the earth, that the heaven and the earth was created in him? Very, very interesting. And the reason why I say that is because in the book of Ephesians and in Colossians chapter 1, it speaks about how through the blood of Christ, that Christ wants to bring heaven and earth back into himself. You can read that in Ephesians and Colossians chapter 1. Okay, it's quite interesting statement, quite paradoxical as well. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, the thing is, in the Bible, the word heaven, we think heaven as in the skies and God's dwelling place, okay? And earth is God's footstool. Now, what's really interesting about that statement is that in the book of Isaiah 66, it says that heaven is God's throne. And it says that the earth is God's footstool. Now, what we need to take on board with that is that a throne and a footstool are furniture that's inside a larger house or a larger reality. A footstool and a throne is inside a kingdom, which is a place. Now, it gets you thinking, because in the book of John chapter 14, I think it is, it's 14:1 or 15:1, I think it's 14. It says 14:2, Jesus Christ said, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. But that word mansions means dwelling places. So in my Father's house is many dwelling places. Now, we know he wasn't speaking about the temple at that time, because the temple was not God's house, and that was a second temple, or Nehemiah's temple. God's presence left the temple, Solomon's temple, in the book of Exodus chapter 8. So we know that Christ was not saying that the new temple or Nehemiah's temple was God's house, because it's not. Okay, so when Christ said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions," well, that means that God has a house with different things inside of it, different rooms, different places to explore. And I find that really, really intriguing. And there's a lot more I can say about all of those things. If you want me to expand on those, leave a comment and I'll expand on each of those points. But if we read Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 again, it would say, in Jesus, God created a throne and a footstool. Woo! That's a different way to look at it. It's quite powerful.